So we've seen how liberal Protestantism gets its origins and begins to flourish. And now we, a conservative church, have a kid in our church that wants to be a pastor, so we send him to our theological center. And when he comes back, he's a liberal. And when he comes back, he doesn't believe the Bible. And when he comes back, all of these things. This rise of liberal fundamentalism is what... I'm sorry, not liberal fundamentalism, just liberalism, is what's going to start to create all of these splinter groups from how do we have 3 Lutheran churches here in town? How do we have all of these things that are Baptist, or Wesleyan, Methodist, Nazarene, are all of these things? So with that, we get the reaction, and that is the rise of fundamentalism. Now that's a loaded term, fundamentalist. And before I say, am I a fundamentalist or am I not a fundamentalist, I need to know what you mean by that word. What are you going to think that word means? But this rise of Neo-orthodoxy is something that we in the Restoration movement experience, and thus we get a split. In the early 20th century, we finally got together. It took us forever to finally get all of our movements to say, fine, we are a non-denominational denomination that will be called the Disciples of Christ, And so we're going along, and this happens, and we get people in the Disciples of Christ who buy into Neo-orthodoxy. And in the early 20th century, we have the first split, which would be some of the churches of Christ break away. And then a couple, 10 years later, we get the real division. The churches of Christ and the Christian church leave the Disciples of Christ. And to this day, we still can... Depending on how fundamentalist the Church of Christ is, we can get along a little bit better with the Church of Christ. We really don't get along with the Disciples of Christ. Even for our centennial, we had problems getting together with the Disciples of Christ. So this is something that we personally experience, but other times it goes the other way. For example, one of the splits in the Lutheran Church in 1976, the Association of Evangelical Lutherans break from the Missouri Synod, and they break because the evangelicals are liberal and the Missouri Synod is too fundamentalist or too conservative. This is a thing that is still happening today. It's something that I'm keeping an eye on, and our issue today, more than any other issue, although yes, we still have church splits over the color of the carpet in the sanctuary and stuff like that. We're not going to get into that. Homosexuality is a huge hot button issue politically, socially, and religiously in our culture today. The Church of England, or Anglican, in 2016, a group of Anglican bishops voted to exclude the American Episcopal Church from sitting on certain boards that had to do with determining what is Anglicanism. And it was over the issue of homosexuality and the American Episcopal acceptance of homosexuality, but the Anglican worldwide not accepting of homosexuality. This issue is far from over in the Anglican Church. They have another meeting next year in 2020, and 2 of the bishops kind of think little popes in the Anglican Church. That's for our Protestant mind to help us understand. They've decided to send invites to the bishops, and bishops in both North America and in Canada and in a few European countries where that bishop has entered into a homosexual relationship, the bishop is invited, but the partner, spouse, whatever word we're going to use, they're not invited to this 2020 meeting. But the conservative bishops in other parts of the world have gone, if they come, we're boycotting this meeting. So where we stand today as outsiders, we're not Anglican, and it doesn't too much affect us, except that we get to stand on the outside and look and see, is the Anglican and the Episcopal Church headed towards schism? We already have two different Episcopal Anglican churches, not counting the Anglican Methodist Church, which is the same but is different, and we can't get into how exactly they're the same and how exactly they're different. But we have the Episcopal Church that closed here in Montrose, and we have the Anglican Church on Townsend, which is part of the Orthodox Anglican American Church, saying, we're not going with the Episcopals on this issue, we're being conservative. So we're seeing this. Another place that this is happening this year is the United Methodist Church. Just back in February, the council, the General Council, I want to say it happened in St. Louis, but the General Council accepted by vote the resolution to include the traditional plan, which affirms that sex is only between a husband and a wife. They also accepted resolutions for punishments for United Methodist clergy that perform same-sex marriages. They also affirmed an exit plan for United Methodist churches who decide to leave the United Methodist Church. Local congregations, and I'm not talking about the local congregation here because I have no data on the one here, but local congregations, when the United Methodist Church had this, they protested. They did not like this decision, and their schools did not like this decision. So once again, we get to stand on the outside and we get to see, is the United Methodist Church headed towards schism? So the idea that schisms are done and over and we've put that in the past, we're still looking at that.